Have you ever tried to complete something that you could not finish or were afraid of not finishing? Do you have any life goals that you fear you'll not be able to fulfill? This is exactly the problem that Keats experiences.
Garners, together or deposit in or as if in a granary or other storage places. Glean, gather poems from. Teeming, abundantly filled. Character, written symbols. High romance. High means that an elevated power or a higher character or quality. Romance, a medieval narrative or chivalry, also an idealistic fiction which tend not to be realistic. Fairy, enchanting.
When I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain, before high-piled books in charactery hold like rich gardeners the full ripened grain, when I behold upon the night's starred face huge cloudy symbols of a high romance, and feel that I may never live to trace their shadows with the magic hand of chance, and when I feel, fair creature of an hour, that I shall never look upon thee more, never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love, then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone and think, till love and fame to nothingness do sink. When I have fears that I may cease to be, before my pen has gleaned my teeming brain, before high-piled books in charactery hold like rich gardeners the full ripened grain.
This portion of the poem explains the speaker's first fear. He fears that he will be unable to write the volumes of poetry he is convinced he is capable of writing. He conveys this feeling by saying, "Before my pen has gleaned from my teeming brain," meaning before his pen has gathered the poems from his filled brain.
When I behold upon the night's starred face huge cloudy symbols of a high romance, and feel that I may never live to trace their shadows with the magic hand of chance.
This portion conveys the speaker's second fear, that he is unable to experience the feeling of high romance, that he will never live to trace their shadow.
And when I feel, fair creature of an hour, that I shall never look upon thee more, never have relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love.
The speaker's last fear is that he may never again see a certain woman and so never experience the passionate emotion of love. He describes this woman as a fair creature of an hour, and that by not seeing her, he will never relish in the fairy power of unreflecting love.
Then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone and think, till love and fame to nothingness do sink.
The last few lines give the reader a picture of the speaker standing alone in silence on the shore of the wide world. This infers that the speaker is simply just thinking about his fears and sadly not really doing anything about his conflict. This is an internal monologue, thus the speaker, who the readers can infer is Keats himself, feels very alone in his fears and might even begrudgingly accept his death when the speaker says, "Till love and fame to nothingness do sink."
The theme of the poem is that death is inevitable. Readers can infer that the speaker is Keats himself, as during the same time he wrote this poem. He was suffering from tuberculosis and was in a love affair that he could not really pursue due to his sickness. In other words, he was realizing that he could never complete his desires before his early inevitable death. The speaker is talking to himself in an internal monologue, so there is no real audience. The situation is a man is conflicted between his professional objective, to be famous, or to follow his heart and eventually fall in love. The setting is in the 1800s in England, probably in a study in his house, because he describes being surrounded by high-piled books. The central purpose of this poem is the speaker telling a personal confession of his fears of an early death. The diction of the poem is carefully worded, including the phrases, "fair creature of an hour," which can mean he is describing his love as gentle and respectful, "rich gardeners," and "full ripened grain," reinforcing the idea of an abundant life, with an abundant professional career and a blossoming love life, but they are mutually exclusive in his mind. Fairy power, inferring that their love is magical, and a love that strong can only be that powerful because of a supernatural power, when in reality it's just a very passionate love. In the second and third lines, the speaker uses the phrase "before" twice,
which can be interpreted as the speaker's time is running out and he is worried he will never be accomplished. The tone is very melancholy and forlorn. The speaker is negative and fears he cannot accomplish what he wants to accomplish before he expires. The imagery in When I Have Fears That I May Cease to Be is when the speaker uses the phrases to describe harvesting, like gleaned and full ripened grain. He also provides images of an enchanted love with the phrases fairy love and fair creature. The speaker likes to give an air of enchanting and passionate love when describing how he dreams of his lover to be. Keats uses paradox when he describes himself as the field of grain, his ideas lying in wait to be harvested, and he also portrays himself as the harvester, who collects all these great ideas or poems. Keats also uses a conceit by continuously using agricultural references to describe different instances in the poem. An example of a simile is, before high-piled books in charactery hold like rich gardeners the full ripened grain. This can also be another example of the conceit mentioned earlier. One metaphor the speaker uses is when he says, huge cloudy symbols of a high romance, as to say that him and his lover have such a regal and passionate love between them. The symbol in Their Shadows with Magic Hand of Chance explains that the speaker's lover and himself are destined to be together, except for the fact that the speaker also lusts after fame.
The poem is a Shakespearean sonnet. The format is that the 3 quatrains are used to describe all the details of the situation, and the couplet at the end is used to show what the speaker's true feelings are. He produces this through the use of iambic pentameter. The author also uses alliteration of the sound R to give off a feeling of abundance. Keats uses the alliteration in the juxtaposition of gleaned, gardener, and grain to reinforce the harvesting metaphor. When I Have Fears is Keats' personal confession of fear of an early death. He tells his readers that he has 2 options of paths to follow in his life: the path of love or the path of fame. In the end, he expresses fears of dying to his audience through the phrase, "Then on the shore of the wide world I stand alone, and think to love and fame to nothingness do sink."